Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Toronto Blue Jays. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins bounce back from a 3-game sweep of the Atlanta Braves to take 2 of 3 from the Blue Jays at home at Target Field. Dan, how necessary was this?
Yeah, super necessary, and it wasn't looking good. Late in Game 3, either that they were going to get a series win there. I thought they needed to sweep this one, but I guess, given how Game 2 went, I will happily settle for a 2 out of 3 series win.
Absolutely. So the Twins now sit 3.5 back from Cleveland, and funnily enough, even with the way this week has gone, they've actually gained on the Royals. So the Royals are also 3.5 back, but the Twins have played less games, so they're technically ahead by winning percentage. So, Dan, a quick note here about last series that I feel really upset about. In my anger and rage last episode, I had all of these notes that I wanted to talk about because I truly believe that Carlos Santana should win a Gold Glove at first base. And in that Braves series, especially Game 2, there were 2 plays he made that were remarkable. One of them was a play where he had to basically run backwards as quickly as he could, and he caught a ball on the fly. And the second ball was a ball that he caught over the Twins' dugout. So he had to reach over and he had to grab the ball. Great plays by Santana. He's been so good at first base. Again, it's one of those things, Dan. It's a life lesson. You shouldn't let your anger get in your way of doing the things that need to be done.
The problem I have with any Gold Glove conversation is we don't watch the other 14 first basemen very often, and so then we remember the great plays that Santana makes. We remember the poor plays too. I'm just glad that we're not the ones voting on that, and that is in better hands.
Is it though? I
Yeah,
don't know how much
it is. I think guys develop reputations over the course of the year. But to be honest, I actually don't even know who votes for the Gold Glove. Is it players? Is it coaches? I think it should be. It should be players and managers. That's who it should be.
It is managers and coaches in each league who are voting.
See, I think that's better because they watch these guys. It's the eye test, right? They know a good first baseman when they see one.
I suppose that's reasonable, Dan. Just a quick note here. They are not allowed, however, to vote for their own players, which makes a lot of sense.
That's only fair.
Otherwise, it's it's another tie. Shocking this season.
Everybody got one vote. It's incredible.
Okay. Well, with that, Dan, let's go ahead and jump into the series recap.
Series recap.
This one was great, Dan. Pablo Lopez continues his dominant stretch. He goes 7 2/3, 6 hits, 3 strikeouts. Twins come away with this one 2-0. So it was absolutely essential that Pablo shut out the Blue Jays because the Twins offense didn't feel like doing much this game.
No, they only have the 4 hits here, but they do get the 2 runs. They would go for 1 for 4 with runners in scoring position, leave 5 guys on base. They made the most of their opportunities here. And the fact that they had Lopez and then, there's kind of 2 relievers right now that Rocco trusts, and it's Jackson Duran, and they're able to take care of, Jackson only needed the 1 out in the 8th, and then Duran pitches a clean 9th.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So bottom of the 4th, Larnach walks, and then he's thrown out by Gausman trying to steal second. He's thrown out at the second base bag, but Gausman hadn't started his move to home. So he's just standing there, and I don't know if Larnach was like, I think I'm going to go. This seems like the right time to go. I know it doesn't really look right, and this isn't how you normally steal a base. I'm just going to give it a go and see what happens.
I think we are seeing a lot of different stuff on the base paths this year, not just with the Twins, obviously, but people, getting different jumps on pitchers. Ellie De La Cruz kind of does whatever he wants, apparently. He even tries to steal when catchers are throwing back to pitchers. Yeah, and I was kind of surprised the Twins didn't get to Gausman more because they have really pounded him in the past.
Yes, I thought the exact same thing. I'm thinking, okay, this will be great. The Twins are definitely going to turn it on. They'll score some runs. Pablo's going to bounce back. But one of those 2 things came true. But bottom of the 5th here, the Twins actually play small ball to score their runs. Miranda had a double, and then Santana knocks him in with an RBI single. Jeffers walks. Austin Martin sack bunt. Willie Castro sack fly to score Santana. It was a great catch by Nathan Lukes to steal extra bases from Castro, actually. But the Twins do manage to scrape that run across. So the Twins score 2-0. And that's actually the end of the scoring for this game, Dan.
Yeah, Pablo gets some help in the top of the 7th defensively. Wallner out there in right field. A little bit of a trial run here, I must say. I think we're kind of seeing a preview of next season. But he's able to get Spencer Horwitz trying to stretch a single into a double. It's close. They reviewed it. He was out, on the plate play that was called on the field, but that was a close play. I kind of thought they might overturn that.
I thought he was safe.
I
Watching
did too.
it live,
Yeah.
I was shocked that the ump called him safe. I'm like, no chance. He's definitely staying there. And then when they didn't overturn it, Dan, I was celebratory, certainly.
And then at the top of the 8th, after a couple hits, Jax replaces Lopez, but he strikes out Dalton Varsho to end the inning, so that's good. And then the top of the 9th, Rocco must be a listener. Kyle Farmer was brought in as a defensive placement for Julian in the 9th. So this is wise. Duran allows a single, but then a fly out followed by a beautiful double play turn by Willie Castro. He fielded it, stepped on second, and threw to get the other guy at first. Farmer did have a similar play to make in the previous at bat, but he wasn't quick enough. He's not as quick, I don't think, as Castro.
No, like obviously so. Like if you watch those plays, like if you overlaid them, Farmer is still like picking up the ball while Castro's at second base already throwing to first.
Well, then there's game 2. So I was not that late to tuning in on this, right? I was 10 minutes after the first pitch, and I checked the score, and it's like 7-0. What, like, Zebby Matthews? What on earth happened here? The Blue Jays win this 15-0.
Get out, Dan. There's no reason to talk about this game. The Twins allowed 23 hits, which is the most since July 25th, 2011, when Nick Blackburn made a start and allowed 11 hits and 6 earned runs in 2 1/3 innings. At one point, Dan, it was at 21 hits, and that was the most hits allowed in a game since 2013. But what was crazy about that is Michael Tonkin also pitched in that game. That's courtesy of Park, the beat reporter for the Twins.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this. I mean, there's a couple funny things, right? Zebby Matthews gives up 9 earned runs in the 2 innings. Kyle Farmer came in and pitched the end. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. He pitches the last 2 innings and only gives up 3. So I think obviously Rocco's got to rearrange his starting rotation here after this.
We joked about using position players just all the time, Dan, in place of this bullpen. And this, honestly, it's a pretty good trial run. So we're trying out Wallner and Wright, and we're trying out position players out of the bullpen. This could be a new winning strategy.
Well, and it really was the perfect loss for Rocco, right? Because the Twins come back and win game 3. But here's all he has to use is Matthews, Tonkin, Blewett for 3 innings, Thielbar, and then Farmer. Like, he saved all of his arms. The Twins do get a couple of hits, so it's Vasquez, Julian, Lewis, and Castro get the 4. Castro walked once, but they were never in this game. All right, so after that, now there was one play that I do want to talk about with Kyle Farmer on the mound. Were you watching the end of this game?
No, Dan, I was not watching. It's a long story, folks. There are not many Twins games that I don't watch in their entirety, particularly on delay, but there was a mishap here where I had looked at my phone. Dan and Hogs had spoiled the game for me.
Were we? I think we talked about this equivocally. Like, I don't think that. I think I said something like, "Wow, Zebby Matthews," or something like that, right?
Well, yeah, and then Hogs says, "I just checked the score." What am I supposed to come away with from that, Dan? Other than Zebby Matthews is getting absolutely shelled.
All right. Well, there was one play at the end of this that was kind of funny. So Nathan Lukes tripled off of Farmer, and if you can picture target field, so the ball was hit to right center, and it's a very high wall there, and it bounced off like the top of the wall and bounced back into play. And Austin Martin is playing center. The brilliant Austin Martin, right?
Yes.
And then the ball kind of bounces in front of him, but then it takes some backspin and bounces back off the top of the center field wall and then back into play. And I couldn't help but think of, I've seen plays with like at San Francisco's stadium where the ball just has weird caroms. Somehow Lukes didn't come around and score here, but it was ruled a triple. But it was one of those bizarre plays that, thank goodness, it didn't actually matter.
Well, it's sort of funny because remember Farmer's inside the park home run also had some funny carom off the wall in order to let that happen.
Totally. But we can move on here. So game 3, a much better game. The Twins do win this one 4-3. Bailey Ober is back as his usual self, giving up a leadoff home run and then nothing else, really, for the rest of his 6 innings. 3 walks, 8 strikeouts. A great bounce back from the Atlanta outing.
Yeah, so it was the top of the first, Ernie Clement solo homer, so the Blue Jays were up 1-0. Bottom of the first, Twins load the bases, but Royce flies out to end the inning. And then this is sort of like we've experienced a lot as of late, which is really quiet middle innings. Ober obviously is really strong for the Twins through 6, and then Yariel Rodriguez and Ryan Yarbrough provide a clean sheet through 6 innings for the Blue Jays. Then in the bottom of the fourth here, this is a weird play. So Martin's on second, Max Kepler pops out, and it's a great catch by Leo Jimenez, who's diving into the netting and falling into the stands. And you know how, if you've ever fished, Dan, you know when you're bringing in a fish and you get a net, and maybe you have one of those old school nets that are like the aluminum handle,
sure,
and
I can picture it,
and the green netting, and the fish gets all tangled in the net. That's what happened to Jimenez here. So he's like trying to get out of the stands, and he can't. He is wrapped up in that netting. But In the chaos here, Martin tags up at second, and he gets to third base. Tommy Watkins is screaming at him to go home. So Martin breaks for home. Well, the Blue Jays are on it. They throw out Martin by like 10 feet. But thankfully, Rocco comes out and says, hey, Jimenez landed out of play, so it's a dead ball. So luckily, the Twins aren't burned by Tommy Watkins' mistake. It doesn't really matter. Lee flies out to end the inning. But my goodness, Tommy Watkins, this is just like when Max Kepler ran when the guy was dead. When the pitcher was dead on the field down the first base line. Tommy Watkins is looking to capitalize on anything here. This is a guy who's literally trapped in the net. The poor guy can't get his cleats out of the net. His whole body is all wrapped up and intertwined.
I'm not dead.
And Tommy Watkins is still sending guys home, Dan. Is there no decency? Is there no dignity for these dead players on the field, Dan?
I mean, not when you just lost to a team 15-0 and you're really trying to come back and win a series. Tommy Watkins, send him. I say send him.
So then bottom of the seventh, Lewis walks. Brooks Lee reaches on an error by Luis de los Santos on the throw to second to get Lewis. So Lewis advances to third. Carlos Santana grounds out to de los Santos again, but he's still frazzled from the error he just made. And so as opposed to going home to try and get Lewis, he throws to first to get the out, but now it's a tie game. And then this is the most fascinating thing that happened in this entire series, Dan. If you watch a lot of Twins games, like we do, Rocco is always in the same spot.
Absolutely.
Rarely does he move. I don't think he eats. I don't think he sleeps. I think he just sits on that one spot on the bench.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
In the Twins dugout. But he gets up, Dan. I honestly, this is the most confusing thing that's ever happened in watching a Twins game. I need to know. Rocco, if you truly are a listener, will you please send us a message and explain your rationale here? He gets up and he walks to the other side of the dugout, Dan. And he stands right in front of the cameraman, like directly in front of the cameraman, and he just stays there for the rest of the game. No explanation. I've never seen him do it before. He's sitting there blowing bubbles with his bubble gum, and what's so cool is they throw a camera on him, and the cameraman behind him is just shrugging his shoulders because he can't get any shots because Rocco's literally standing right in his way.
This would be kind of like if a penguin just showed up at your door. Like, what would you do with the penguin there all of a sudden? You're so out of water.
Ogres are like onions.
That's not even a reference to anything. There was a meme. I don't know if you ever saw that meme where the woman goes, there's someone at the door, and the husband is banging the table, and he goes, is it a penguin? And she goes, what? Why would it be and he cocks a shotgun, and he goes, is it a penguin? And she goes, it is. And he goes, it's starting. Is that what you're referencing? That's the only reason why I would think you're talking about
a penguin came into my mind.
It's like a meme from the late 2000s that Dan's referencing in my head.
Anyway,
where are we? I'm so lost.
Well,
where are we?
Yeah, anyway, so we're to the top of the eighth here, and the Twins have just tied this up, which is classic Twins then, to give the lead away. And it's Griffin Jax who does it. He enters, he walks Nathan Lukes on a bad call by the ump. It's actually Jax's first walk since July 10th. Ernie Clement singles, Spencer Horwitz lines out, Lukes advances to third, Clement steals second, so we got second and third now. Jax walks the bases loaded, and then he hits Leo Jimenez to score a run, so now it's 2-1 Toronto. And then Joey Loperfido grounds out to lead. There's no play at home, but he does get the out at first, so it's 3-1, and there's deflation, I would think, in all of Target Field at this point.
Just upset. I'm watching this one with a buddy. I'm quite frustrated. I'm throwing things at the screen. I'm trying not to wake up my kid who's napping, but thank goodness for Royce Lewis finally making contact, because that guy, Dan, has had so many opportunities, so many moments in the past 10 games to come through with a Royce Lewis signature victory swing, and he hasn't done it. But bottom of the eighth, Jeffers singles, Martin singles, Royce Lewis comes through huge, 3-run go-ahead home run that barely clears the wall in left field. So it puts the Twins up 4-3. They review it. I don't really think they needed to review it. It was quite obviously a home run. But anyway, they confirm it, and there is rejoicing in the land. Top of the ninth, Duran closes it out after hitting Brian Severin, and that's it. The Twins come away with the series victory, 2 out of 3.
And with that, it was a much needed series victory. They're going to go on the road now to Tampa and to Kansas City, and again, lo and behold, they're still very much a playoff team.
Yes. Well, with that, Dan, let's go ahead and jump into the Puckett's Picks winner.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
I don't think that this should count. So we let Royce Lewis slip to Hogs, and there was a part of me that thought, well, obviously Royce Lewis is going to have a Royce Lewis moment, and sure enough, he did.
He did. Quite frustrating, and it does give Hogs the victory. Lewis had 8 points. Dan, you took Miranda, who had 4. I took Santana, who had 1, and the listeners took Wallner. They went away from Lewis, and this is sort of a trend. Like, as soon as the listeners break who they've selected, they pick the hot hand, and it doesn't go well. Wallner with -4 on the series, Dan.
Yeah, and so then season standings, David, you still have the lead with 21.5, but Hogs has 16. He gets that half-point bonus as well. Listeners have 10. I have 8. There are still 8 series. It is not sealed up.
No, I have to do a little bit better here. I just have to make sure that Hogs doesn't go on a tear here, because that does mean that he could come back for the victory.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
I think what's going on here is that the Twins have 2 really good starting pitchers. And so whenever they do what they're supposed to do, we think, well, that's got to be the Beast because they need him so badly. I went with Pablo Lopez because he had a great start in game 1. And then you, I see, have picked his counterpart.
Bailey over in game 3, Dan. I don't know how you choose anybody else because this offense was ridiculously poor in this series. They could not get a hit when it mattered outside of Royce's big hit, obviously. And so it's one of those things, Dan, where you have to go where the Beast lies. And the Beast in this instance lies on the starting pitching.
Do you think that Bailey Ober's children kind of felt bad for their father, after the Atlanta outing? Do you think they were extra nice to him during this and this is why he pitched better?
You have this trend, Dan, that whenever a player plays particularly well, like you mentioned this with Christian Vasquez also, that maybe his kids were extra nice to him or something. I am concerned. Is your home life okay, Dan? Like, are your children, do they just treat you poorly?
Do the Twins players know enough? Like, do they notice these things? Because we know that Carlos Correa's kids, are very enamored of Royce Lewis, right? But are Bailey Ober's kids, are they just kids who don't care how bad your day was at work when you get home? The quarterback documentary, right? Where very famously, where Kirk Cousins comes home after the playoff loss to the Giants and puts his kids to bed and is giving them a bath and, reading them books. Do they even care?
I don't think that they know, Dan, but I think honestly as parents, wow, we have veered off course a little bit here, Dan. And, but I will say as parents, I think that it's important that your kids do understand when you've had a hard day, but I also think it's vital that you don't take it out on them. You can tell them that, hey, Daddy had a rough day at work, and then maybe you're extra short with them, and it's important that you apologize, Dan, if you're not nice to your children.
This parenting moment was brought to you by Men for the Win, a podcast about baseball and not about parenting advice. Sorry, I took us there, David, but I couldn't help but wonder.
Well, it's a fair question. We don't think about athletes' home life outside of Rocco and the Twins and all that, but and Rocco, you notice there's not a lot of kids in the clubhouse nowadays here. The Twins aren't exactly rolling on win streaks, so Rocco doesn't
daughter's not bouncing on his leg during the post-game pressers anymore.
No. Okay, on my bench here, I got to put Max, my boy Max Kepler, sadly. You know what it is, Dan? So he goes 0 for 8, and he's having some knee trouble, and it's really hard to dance, Dan, when your knees don't feel right. And if he can't do his pregame dance warm-ups, I mean, how can he be expected to play baseball?
Because that he warms up doing, the bit from Dirty Dancing, where Rocco runs to him and then he lifts him up. That's how Rocco knows whether Max Kepler's knee is okay.
His walk-offs, it's always funny. I find it interesting that he's always stretched out over a chair when they give him the Gatorade bath. Why is that?
It's remarkable. So my guy also, I'm putting Matt Wallner on my bench. He was 1 for 11. He had 5 strikeouts. This is the dark side of a guy who swings as hard as he does. He did not have the big hit. He had some opportunities, of course. But this is the boom and bust that you're going to get, I think, with a guy like Matt Wallner.
Yeah, he just has to limit the strikeouts and hit a home run every 5th at bat. But with that, let's go on to Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
I love, by the way, that Kyle Farmer pitched the last 2 innings of Game 2. Here's what I liked about it. I liked that Rocco is not falling for the nostalgia of baseball that says, oh, well, you can't have position players pitch because it's an insult to the fans. No, this is about winning the series, and that's what Rocco did. He did everything he needed to, and it was fine, and they won Game 3, and all is well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a hard time praising the guy when you're down 15-0.
Well, it wasn't he wasn't out there pitching, certainly. I mean, he made the best of a difficult situation.
But, I mean, you or I could manage that. It's not like it took a whole bunch of, extra brain activity.
It took courage, though. Who did I praise? Did I praise David Festa for his courage last episode?
Man, it's a trope at this point. You're like a novelist who every single novel you come out with the same sort of idea who the killer was.
Isaac, you did something right.
Oh, wait. I wanted it to go through my head.
Oh, Dan. Oh,
That
Dan.
was for
Okay.
Rocco there. Anyway, what do you got for him?
Yeah, so clearly changing where you sit was a good call. I am so curious, Dan. I have to know. The only thing I could think of, and this is maybe just the elementary school student in me, but like maybe somebody passed some gas, and so Rocco just moved down there, and then he didn't want to move back. Like, to me, that's what makes the most sense. Like, what else would facilitate Rocco being like, you know what, I think I'm going to change where I'm sitting?
Maybe we're just giving Rocco way too much credit, right? Like, he wasn't even thinking about this at all. He just needed a stretch.
I would go along with that rationale if it wasn't so obviously unique. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It wasn't like he does this like every third game. He walks down to the other side of the end of the dugout and he stands there. No, it was weird. Everybody's looking at it like, why is Rocco over there?
Well, we'll never know. We'll have to keep looking.
I want to find out. Honestly, if I could ask one question of the Twins, that would be my question. But anyway, I also have another question for Rocco. Why Sands and not Alcala in Game 3 top 7? I mean, you have your guys. You got Alcala, Jackson, Duran. They're all healthy. They're all ready to go.
But have you seen Alcala pitch lately?
Well, okay,
I mean,
that's
Sands
fair.
is the better pitcher.
That's fair. So maybe Rocco deserves some praise there. I was just asking a question.
Okay.
I wasn't
All right.
criticizing.
So that's your second question.
Yeah, and then my thank you and appreciation to Rocco for using Farmer as a defensive replacement. About time.
I think we've found Kyle Farmer's 3 roles on this team, right? Clubhouse guy, defensive replacement, and pitcher.
Yeah. But yeah, add that to his resume, Dan. Under special skills, it's like pitches in blowouts, you know.
Yeah, everybody needs that on there. All right, let's look forward to we have more to say about the pitching here in the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
Well, so this is going to sound like I'm just saying the same thing again. Zebby Matthews had a terrible outing, right? And I think that that's notable given the fact that I have loved what Zebby Matthews has done so far. And he handled it with aplomb, right? He took responsibility, said, I got to learn from this, blah, blah, blah. But it clearly shows the limitations and the risks of this team's approach right now of having 3 rookies in the starting rotation and still being a playoff team. Like, this is baffling to me that they're even in this spot, and it's just so precarious.
Dan, I was under the impression that this is going to be their finest hour.
Well,
and here
it
you
might
are.
be. I'm not saying it's not. Apollo 13, it was precarious, right? The Martian, it was precarious. Like, we weren't sure if Mr. Watney was going to make it back when he made that trek across the Martian landscape. Like, there's always a little bit of doubt. That's what makes stories great, David.
This episode is by far the most philosophical we've had in quite some time, Dan. I'm going to bring us back to baseball here. It's got to be Game 3, bottom 8, obviously.
Well, yeah,
Royce Lewis
yeah.
go-ahead home run. I mean, I'm taking the easy way out here, but my goodness, if you didn't stand up and shout when that happened, you obviously weren't watching the game.
He is the one.
And that was a long at bat. He fouled off a lot of pitches. He didn't just like appear and hit the home run. I thought that was one of his better at bats, just to battle through and wait for a pitch right down the middle, and he didn't miss it.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
So my question, Dan, is should we just expect Bailey Ober to have one of these bad games every now and again? Like, it's not that he struggles a little bit, Dan. It's that he just gets absolutely demolished. And I don't understand. Is it tipping pitches? Is it actually that his kids were really rambunctious the night before and he didn't sleep well? Like, something has to be consistent in why Ober has these just, honestly, he's a different pitcher on these games where he's getting shelled, and they're few and far between, but when they happen, it's sort of like, oh no, it's one of these again.
Well, we've seen him have starts like today where he gave up a home run early and then righted the ship. So it is very weird that he's had these moments. Tipping the pitches seems to be the most obvious thing, and yet you would think it would happen in more matchups if he was doing that, and it wouldn't be something that he'd just like slip into and forget. Kind of like Chris Paddock, where we thought maybe he was with the location of his glove earlier this season. Well, mine is a larger question about whether you think this team is really capable of winning a playoff series, and I'm counting it as that opening best of 3 playoff series. Can they do that? Do you think they could win one?
A best of 3, certainly, no question. Because with Lopez and Ober, certainly. The question becomes who needed to be used in those first 2 games, and if SWR is truly your third starter at this point, like if Paddock is back, maybe he can give you a couple of innings too, because SWR isn't going more than 5 in a postseason series. So in my head, the only way way the Twins realistically win a 3-game series is if Pablo and Ober win the first 2 out of the gate and the Twins walk away with it there.
Is this crazy to spread those 2 out and to have Pablo go game 1 and SWR go game 2, and then if it totally falls apart, you at least have all of your arms ready to win a game 3?
No, I don't think so. I think what you have to do is you have to go early with the guys who you think give you the best chance to win. I guess it depends on the count. So you're saying only in a 3-game series?
I'm saying only in the 3-game, because Rocco, this is how he wins series, right? He plays to win the next game. If you win the first one, if you don't win the first one, you have to go with Ober in the second one. But let's say you win game 1, can you just say, hey, game 2, SWR, see what you got? And then you've got Ober for game 1 of a next series potentially.
Well, I mean, and are they home or are they away?
They're probably away at this point.
See, if they're away, I think all 3 are away. I think you go Pablo and then Ober. I don't love the idea of having to go to SWR thinking, well, we can give this one away when you know you're not at home.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'll be an interesting situation to look at. Let's go ahead and grade this series against the Blue Jays.
Series grades.
A rarity here, Dan. I'm a little bit higher than you. I'm giving them a B-. They came out of the gate. They won 2 of 3. Game 2 was just a bad game, Dan. Nobody cared. They got down so deep so early. The game was over before it started. You're going to have those games every now and again. It's just sort of a bummer that, like, I'm guessing Zebby Matthews is a bit shook after that performance. Hopefully he can bounce back because it's not like the Twins have other guys to turn to. But the team over the series goes 2 for 14 with runners in scoring position. That's not sustainable. You're not going to win series doing that, especially knowing that your starting pitching isn't up to snuff. But I am going to give them a B- because you got 2 victories, and honestly, the 2 games that you won, you at least really you put the pedal to the metal from the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's funny to say. I mean, they got outscored 19-6 in this series and won 2 of the games. I gave them an 8 out of 10 in the advanced retreat because of that. But as far as the well-played baseball, you give up 15 runs in one game. It's hard to do much of anything better than a C. So that's why I went with a 7 out of 10, which comes out to 15 out of 20, which is a C. It was a fine enough series, but man, a little better showing in game 2 would have been nice.
Certainly the case, Dan. Let's go on here, Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
The Royals, Dan. The Royals add both Tommy Pham and Robbie Grossman off waivers. And to me, that's a team that's here to play. And it's sort of annoying. I'm not exactly sure on the timing of the waiver wire, but had the Twins put in claims, I think when they were behind the Royals for like 2 days, could they not have claimed them? I guess I don't know exactly how that works.
I think also the fact that Manny Margot went on the injured list and then they're kind of looking for another outfielder. I just wonder how that timing worked out, which we should say Brooks Lee and Diego Castillo were called up, and then also Michael Hellman, this is a cool story that he finally gets to play in the majors here. He was called up as well. They did some shuffling of the 60-day IL to make room on the 40-man. So Margot's out, and those 3 guys are up. I'm excited to see Hellman. But yeah, I do wonder about that. I'm a little annoyed that the Twins are going to play Robbie Grossman again. I mean, this is, I think, the 3rd team that he has played for this season, and he will play against the Twins for each of those.
That's an ESPN stat if I've ever heard one, Dan. Like, what player has played against the Twins 3 different times in the same season? Crazy.
For 3 different teams. Yeah. And then we need to update on the Tigers. So they did go farther back. They're 5 back now in the wild card. David, are you sweating? Should I be sweating?
You should be sweating, Dan. I've already been picking up my German handbook here. I'm trying to learn some German phrases for that ticket you're going to buy me to Essen. I'm very excited.
Are you just studying all of those multilingual directions for board games? You know how they print them in like 5 or 6 different languages? Like you're scanning like, all right, setup here in the English. Okay, here's the setup for the German. Okay, all right. I can get a few of these words.
Orthogonal is a game you don't hear much outside of the board gaming community. But one more quick hit here. The Cardinals, Dan, I wouldn't have guessed this. I don't know who kept track of this, but the Cardinals win a game at Yankee Stadium for the first time since Game 5 of the 1964 World Series.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they don't play there very often, and they will more frequently now, but that is a random stat. Surely it's been a few series at least.
Last note here, let me indulge a little bit here. MLB Network just released a documentary on Greg Maddux. It's called One of a Kind. I haven't got to watch the whole thing, but the bits that I've got to watch I think are just fascinating. And this particular story told by Eddie Perez, who's the battery mate of Greg Maddux for the Braves for a lot of years here. This happens at some point in the 90s. But so, throwing against Bagwell for the Astros, Eddie Perez has been told by Greg Maddux the whole game, hey, we're going to pitch Bagwell outside, okay? But the Braves are up big at this point. They're up 8 runs. There's a runner on, and Maddux is still on the bump. And he says to Perez, we're going to throw Bagwell inside. And Eddie's like, what are you talking about? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, Bagwell hits a home run, like a deep no-doubter to left field. As he's coming off the mound at the end of that inning, Maddox tells Eddie Perez that he did this intentionally because he knew that the Astros had a good team and they're going to see them in the postseason, and Bagwell's going to sit on that pitch. And Eddie Perez is like, you're crazy. Like, this is just insanity what you're talking about. 3 months later, Dan, in the postseason, 7th inning, bases loaded, Greg Maddox strikes out Bagwell with the bases loaded, looking for that pitch. He threw him 3 straight changeups, and he got Bagwell to chase all of them. How many times did he do that? Like, I mean, is this just like the one time it worked? You know what I mean? But I think he was truly that good. I mean, that is just an absolutely phenomenal story, Dan.
Right. You have to be totally at the top of your craft to be able to think of all of those things, not let alone just pitch the ball inside when you say you're going to, or outside. The credit that needs to go to these pitchers, and especially a control guy like Greg Maddox, is just remarkable what he could do with a baseball. By the way, not a 100% first ballot Hall of Famer. Thank you to those 5 voters or something who have this principle that you can't let a guy in on the first ballot.
Ridiculous. But let's go on here. Puckett's picks for the upcoming Rays series.
And we'll see you tomorrow night. Puckett's picks.
Well, the listeners, Dan, they're going back to Lewis, which I don't know what to tell them. So I get next pick here. I'm going to take Brooks Lee because I don't know what else to do. And then it'll go to you, Dan. Who you taking?
I guess I'm going to go with Larnach to keep the L streak alive here. So that's who I'm going with. And then we have Hogs who gets to make the last pick.
Hogs has not chimed in here. And I know that Hogs is the guy who likes his holidays. And, maybe he doesn't have his phone on him. Maybe he's a little bit busy. I don't know. So I say we can give him whoever we want. And the thing is, I'm going to let you pick for Hogs, Dan, because it does truly matter because Hogs could still catch me. And I think it would be unfair of me to take, I don't know, Austin Martin or something like that. Like, I don't think it's fair for me to. Eddie Julian actually would probably be the pick I'd want to make for Hogs.
Good call. I think I will actually give him Jose Miranda, who is coming off a pretty good series with my pick. So Miranda's going to be the one for Hogs, and we'll hope that he's not mad when he sees that text, and that's the guy he ends up with.
At worst case, if Hogs reaches out and he, wakes up from wherever he is and he sends us a text, we can make a change. We'll make an announcement next episode. All I'm saying is if he picks somebody else and they outscore Miranda, I will protest, is all I'm saying.
Well, we'll keep the receipts on the text message thread. David, I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and send us out. Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win, and you can find our Min for the Win Facebook and Instagram pages. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite platform so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.